In this video, we will implement a React project which will be suitable for your CV. It is not huge, but it has lots of logic inside, and I am talking here about React Calculator. This is exactly what we will build here from scratch. So let's look on our code. First of all, inside global CSS, I prepared some styling for our calculator. You can take it from the source code in the description box below. Also inside app.tsx, I prepared full markup of calculator. This is how it looks like. These are just buttons without any logic and applied CSS. We don't want to spend time on writing basic markup. This is why it is all here for you. So what do we have? This is just our markup with buttons. And in each row, we have here 4 buttons. As you can see here, these 4 buttons, this, and so on. And each button has a handle click function where inside we're providing the name of this button. Like for example, 1, 2, 3, and our operations. Also, it is important to mention that we're using here TypeScript to make our code safer and easier to validate. And the first thing that I want to implement is the state for our calculator. Why that? Because we need to store some values in the organized manner. This is why here on the top, I first want to create a type. Let's create it as a state. And we need just 3 fields. First of all, it will be a total. It will be either string or null. Then we have next, it is also string or null, and then we have an operation, it is also string or null. So what is our logic? We have here our operations, so when we're hitting one of the operation, we store them here in the operation. When we select some number, we will store it inside next, and when we clicked on the number, so we filled our next, then we're clicking on the operation, for example plus, we're filling our operation, and when we're clicking again on another number, then we're moving our next to the total, because our total changes, and then we're storing the second number in the next. It is totally fine if you don't grasp it from the beginning, you will see while implementation how it will work. So first of all here I want to prepare our initial state, and this is of type state that we just created, and let's create all these initial values. By default our total is null, our next is also null, and our operation is null, which means our state is completely empty. Now here inside our app we can create a state and set state function, which is just a useState hook, and we can provide here initial state. Most importantly, we can set the data type state here, so it is only possible to throw inside this state the correct format of our state. After this, I want to console log here our state, because it will be handy for debugging. As you can see, after page reload, our state is there and all fields are null. Now here we have our handle click, which happens when we click anything. What I want to do here, I want to calculate new state of our calculator by calling a function calculate that we will create in a second, and we're providing inside our current state and a name. This is the button where we clicked. After we got our new state, we want to use setState and update our state with new state that we calculated. Now outside of our component, I will create a function calculate, and we know that we are getting here our state, which is a type state, and also a name, which is a string. And essentially we can move this calculate to some helpers, because this is a helper function. I will keep it here just for better understanding. So just to make it working so TypeScript doesn't scream on us here, we can return state. Additionally, here we can specify that our function must return a valid state. And here let's console log our calculate with state and name so we can see what we are doing. And if this project looks too complicated for you, this is totally fine. I have a much easier project, a React quiz, which is more suitable for a beginner level, and you can find the link to this course in the description under the video. Now in browser, when I'm clicking 7, for example, we're calling our calculate function with our current state and 7, and we can update it somehow. And essentially, when we're clicking anything, we're calling this calculate function and we're providing inside our operator. And the first and the easiest case to implement is to cover this button to clear our value inside calculator. This is why here inside calculate we can write that if our name equals AC, then we just want to return here our initial state. So this is this state, we simply set all our values to null. We can't test this function right now because our state is already initial. This is why let's write some logic for our numbers that we can click. So what I want to do is to distinguish between our numbers and operators. This is why we need here a helper function isNumber, where we're getting some item which is a string. This is a button which we clicked, and it must return for us boolean. Now inside we can just check with regular expression that this item that we provided inside is a number. How does it work? This item can be either a stringified number or some operator. And we're checking that this is between 0 and 9, which means these are all these numbers and not operators. And we're testing this item with this regular expression. Now, after our first if condition, we can check that if it is number, and here we must provide our name, then we can return the spread of the whole state, and here we want to update next to name. What does it mean? We essentially in our initial state update our next field with the name that we clicked. Let's check if it's working. I'm hitting 7. As you can see, calculate was called, and now our state was updated through calculate function, and we see our state where next is 7. Now let's remove calculate because it is a little bit confusing, and let's cover the next case. So basically we can click on the same number several times. As you can see, I clicked 7, but we still have next 7. Here we don't see 77 or 777. So we must concatenate these numbers if we are clicking and we already have next. Which actually means we're here inside our isNumber. We must check, do we have state.next? And if yes, we want to concatenate our next. So let's do this, but we also want to check for 0, because if it is 0, then we don't need to concatenate it. We don't want 0, 0. This is why here let's check our state next equals 0. If yes, then we simply throw inside our name. In another case, we're doing state.next plus name. After this, we can just return our spread with state and our next, which actually means in the case where next is already there, we're concatenating our two strings and we're writing them inside next, but not when next equals 0. Let's check this out. I'm reloading the page. I'm clicking 0. As you can see, next is 0 and now 2. We don't see here 0, 2, which will be incorrect logic. We see here just 2. Now, if I'm trying to write 5, 5, 5, it is concatenated correctly, and now our value is 555. Now we need to cover a case where we're clicking on operator. This is why here after our if isNumber, instead of return state, we can say return an object. Here we want to write total equals state.next, then next equals null, and operation equals name. What does it mean? Here, first of all, we checked for AC or other buttons that we want to check later. Then we're checking here for a number. And after this, we have code about operation. And this is what we're doing here. First of all, we're storing an operation inside. Secondly, we're emptying our next, but we're moving a value of next in the total. This is how it looks like. I'm reloading the page. We're clicking 5, so we have next 5. And I'm clicking plus here. What happens? We don't have next 5 and operation plus. We moved this 5 to the total and operation to plus. What it allows us to do now, we can hit another number like 2. And as you can see, we stored not only 2, but we didn't lose 5. We now store total 5 next to operation plus, which means we can do our calculation. So now it is time to cover our equals sign because we have the whole data, and when we hit equals, we want to calculate the value. How can we do that? So here we can write a condition for name equals sign, then we want to return here calculation, but not always. When user simply clicks on equals sign and we don't have next in operation, then nothing should happen. This is why here let's check if we have state.next and we also have state.operation, then we can do this calculation. In another case here I want to return just normal unchanged state, because it means we simply hit equal sign but we don't have enough information. What I want to call here is return, and inside total I want to call a function operate, where I want to provide our current state. then next will be null, and operation should also be cleared to null. What does it mean? We are throwing inside the whole state with all our fields, and then operate function must calculate and return for us a value, which is a string based on operation and our numbers. So here before our function calculate, I want to create a function operate, which must do our calculations. And we're getting here state, which is our state, and we must get back a string. But here is a point. It is quite difficult to make arithmetic calculations inside plain JavaScript. This is why I recommend you to use a library, which is called Big.js, and this is an extremely easy library to work with arithmetic in JavaScript. This is why let's install it with npm install Big.js, and as we're using TypeScript, we also want to install types Big.js in development. Now here on the top we can import big from Big.js, and now inside our operate we can create two instances of Big.js. So here we want to create a variable 1 by calling big constructor, and we must provide inside state total, and as you can see total can be null, we need to fallback it to a 0. Now let's do exactly the same for variable 2, and it will be state next, which we are fallbacking to 0. Now here we must cover 4 cases that we have, and it is plus, minus, divide and multiply, which actually means we can write here if our state operator, then we want to return 1 dot plus, as you can see we have here all these operators, we can provide 2 and just call to string. This will return for us a string of what we got. Now after this we can check for operator equals minus, and in this case we can use 1 minus 2, and also we're calling to string. Another one is multiplication, so here will be operator equals multiply, and here we're calling 1 times 2 and converting it to string. And the last one here will be division, so state operator equals divide, but here we can't just return divide because we can't divide by 0, and we must check that. This is why let's check that if our state.next equals 0, then we can write, for example, an alert divide by 0 error, and we can return here, for example, a string with 0. In other case, we can use division just normally, so it will be 1 divide by 2 to string. But as you can see here, TypeScript will scream because we are lacking a return. This is why what I want to do afterwards, I want to throw an error if we have some operator which is not supported. So we can write here throw new error, unknown operator, and here let's write state.operation, so we see what is the error about. And this is everything that we need inside our operate function. Now we can do all our operations. And actually we use this function already for our equal sign, so let's check this out. I'm hitting 5 plus 2. As you can see, total is 5, next is 2, operation is plus. I'm hitting equals, and we're getting total 7, next is null and operation null, which actually means it was calculated correctly and we're storing a value inside total. Now we need to cover a possibility to hit any other operation instead of equal sign. How can we do that? So after our if for equal, I want to write if we're getting state.operation, then we want to return here a total with operate function that we already created, and we're passing state inside. In next we want to store null, but inside operation we want to store a name of the operation. And here I want to leave a comment so we understand later why we wrote this. Here user pressed an operation button and there is already an existing operation. How does it look like? We click 5 plus 2. As you can see, there is already an existing operator. We have here plus, and at this moment I'm hitting plus again. So what happens, we're jumping in this if condition with state operator, we're calculating our total, here it is, total 7, we empty our next, but we store an operator that we just clicked, and it is a plus. Now we want to cover positive negative number. This is why here let's write a condition for our name equals plus minus. And here we have two different cases. Either we need to change our next or total, depending on what we have in the state. So here let's check, do we have state.next? If yes, then we need to change it. So we want to return the whole state, but we want to invert our next. And this is how we can do that. For example, our next is 55. In order to make minus 55, we can use here parse float function, because we need to get a number. We're getting 55. Now we can multiply it on minus 1. We're getting minus 55. And after this, we need to put round brackets and write toString. We're getting minus 55 as a string, and this is the minimum that we must write. This is why I will copy paste it and use here for our next. So we're multiplying minus 1 parse float. Here will be our state.next toString, and this will update our next value. Now exactly the same we must do if we have our total. So state total must be inverted. We're copy pasting the whole line here, and we're changing our total by calling it on state.total. Let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page, hitting 5. As you can see, next we have 5. Now I am clicking on minus, and we're getting minus 5. I'm clicking again, we're getting 5, again minus 5. Now let's check it with total. I'm doing plus 10, for example. Hit enter. In total we have 5, and now I am clicking on minus. In total now it is minus 5, which is completely correct. We have just two operators left to cover, and this is dot and percentage. Let's start with the dot because it is easier. We can check here that if name equals dot, then we want to write our logic, and here we have two different things. Either we want to put dot after our number, or we want to put 0 dot. Because if I hit 5 and then dot, it must make 0.5 from it. Let's cover all cases here. First of all, I want to check that we don't have state.next. And when we hit dot, it should return 0 dot. So it will be return state. And inside our next, we are providing a string 0 dot. Now another case here will be if we already have a dot inside our string. So let's check this. If our state.next includes dot, so it has dot inside, then we can't really do anything with the dot. We simply return state, which means dot in this case doesn't do anything. And the last case will be just a return where we're spreading our state and we're creating our next based on state.next, and we're just concatenating it with the dot. Let's see how it looks like. First of all, I'm reloading the page and I'm hitting dot. As you can see, what appears inside next is 0 dot. And what it allows us to do is hit, for example, 5, and we're getting 0.5 in next. Another case here will be to hit dot right now. I'm hitting dot and nothing changes because we already have a dot inside our next. And the last case would be to write some number, for example 555. I'm hitting dot and now we're getting dot afterwards. So I can write like this and we're getting a floating number. And the last one here to cover is percentage. So let's check here for the name %. And here we have just two conditions. If we don't have state next, we can't really do anything. This is why here I will simply return state. In another case, we want to update our state, and inside our next, we want to make a division by 100, and this is where we can use our big.js library. So on the fly, I want to convert our state.next to a big instance, so I can call division, and I'm calling it on big again, where I'm providing a string 100. And after this, I'm converting it to string. This single liner will get us correct percentages. Let's check this out. I'm reloading the page, hitting 5, maybe 100, and then percentage sign. And as a result, we're getting here 5. If I'm hitting just 5 and then %, we're getting 0.05. Which means our percentages are working correctly. We successfully covered all logic regarding our calculator, but we are still missing our display. But our state is correct. This is why we can simply render here a number. How can we do that? Let's scroll to our app component, and here in the display, we simply render 0. What I want to render instead, here after our state, let's create a variable display and assign here either state.next or state.total, or it will be a 0 by default. Now we can render this display inside our display container. So we have here 0, I'm typing something, and our value changes. I can hit plus and then type something else, hit enter, and it is rendered here correctly. But we have here a problem. First of all, font size is small, but additionally we want to make this font size dynamic. Why is that? Because I can type here a huge number which goes out of the screen. And inside default calculator, inside macOS, the font size of the number is becoming smaller and smaller the bigger this number is. This is exactly what we want to do with some JavaScript logic. So first of all, here we need a reference to the DOM node. This is why here let's get a text reference. And we're calling here useRefHook, where inside we're providing HTML div element. And by default it will be null. Now we can attach on our display a reference which will be our text reference. And now here let's create a useEffect hook which will work on our display. So here as a second parameter we're providing an array of dependencies, and the only dependency here is our display value, because based on it we will select different font size. So here let's create a function adjust font size, and we will call it directly afterwards. Now first of all, inside this function let's store our element, and we're reading it from our text reference .current. Also, let's create some default font size. So in this case, I will create 70, and we can set it inside our element. So element.style.fontSize equals, and here let's concatenate this variable font size with pixels. But this is only a default value. When this display changes, we want to adjust it. This is why here we need a while loop, and we're comparing here element.scrollWidth. As you can see, I am getting question marks because our element can be null. We can put here an exclamation mark to let TypeScript know that this element is always there. Now we don't need a question mark here, and we can compare our scroll width, and when it is bigger than element.clientWidth and our font size is still bigger than 1, so we can still make it smaller, we will make font size minus minus, and then we're updating our font size. This is this line. What does it mean? This function will be called again and again until our value is fit to our container. But actually here I see a small typo. We need to use just one equal sign because we're assigning here a value. Let's check if it's working now. I'm reloading the page, and voila, our 0 is super huge and readable because it can fit in this container. Now we can start typing, and as you can see, with time our font size will become smaller and smaller, so our number is not going out of the container, which is really handy. And if this project looks too complicated for you, this is totally fine. I have a much easier project, a React quiz, which is more suitable for a beginner level, and you can find the link to this course in the description under the video. Now you have a calculator project with quite complex logic. But what about testing? If you want to learn how to implement testing inside React correctly on the real examples, make sure to check this video where we're doing exactly that.